think this movie would have legs like this.
No, I mean, I don't think when you make anything, you really think about the future of it, right? And how it's going to grab the imagination of the people. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who weren't even born when this movie was made. And it amazes me. I really always like to know, like, why is this such a popular movie, do you think?
It takes an imaginative concept and it plays it out very logically and very inventively, and there haven't been a lot of really good time travel movies. I mean, there's a few that are excellent and a lot of kind of funky ones, and this one is just really. And also, it's the cast.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox are tremendous. We were just talking about Michael J. Fox. I think, when, for those of you who are old enough, he was a big star from Family Ties when this was being made. And people sort of wrote him off as a kind of lightweight TV actor. And he is anything but lightweight. I mean, so much of this movie is him reacting.
Mm-hmm.
His reactions are so good and so inventive and so funny. And I remember him saying that he and Christopher Lloyd just hit it off immediately, and Lloyd's energy was so high, and his energy was so high that my first question is, so how did you get involved? Was it you had done E.T. for Spielberg? And was it Spielberg who brought you onto this?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then I met with Bob Zemeckis, and there we go. So lucky girl,
Mm-hmm.
Now, my first question of this logistically is, I don't know how many of you know this. The original Marty was it was Eric Stoltz, and they shot for, I think, was it a month or 6 weeks?
6 weeks, yeah.
So what? How do you, when you have a change of leading man like that? I mean, in terms of the physicality is different, the physique is different, everything else is different. How do you pivot like that and come up with a new design on fairly short notice, I'm sure?
Very short notice. I think it was like a Friday night. We shot a lot of nights on that, as you can tell. And, I went home and got a phone call, basically like, oh, there's going to be a little change of actors. And my recollection, of course, is that we didn't drop a day. We kept shooting on Monday. So it was a really hectic weekend, and then it was kind of just a do-over because everything was different between the two actors. And Michael's physicality, much, much different. So it just sort of, I just started over. And we went back and we didn't reshoot everything. What we did was, I thought, much harder and really hard on props and was to go back to an actual scene that we had already shot, remove and shoot every angle that would involve in Michael with everything that was already there, right? So you had to absolutely do everything. It was an absolute masterclass in matching. So that was kind of stressful for everybody, but it worked out. You can't tell. You really can't tell.
No, because there was originally a different actress played his girlfriend, and I think that's right. They recast her because of height. It's a height thing. And because apparently Eric Stoltz, he wasn't doing a bad job, he was just playing it seriously. Like
he was a really different actor.
Yeah.
A much different actor. And it's kind of a shame, and it's not a great. I feel bad that it carries on. Like, this is one of the stories of making it Back to the Future. So
it's just kind of fascinating. I mean, and again, it's so strange because I just can't imagine Back to the Future without Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox.
Right. Absolutely not. And I think there's a really just a gutsy move on the it says that shows the power of the director and the producers that they can make that decision and obviously for the best. Yeah. And
it costs a lot to reshoot. It was expensive. But now, how did Marty's signature look develop?
What would you consider his signature? You mean his 80s?
The grid shirt.
The 80s?
The 80s, yeah, and the red puffy vest.
Well, it was just kind of a compilation of a lot of things. And in 1985, 1955, the first thing about doing all the research was sort of to see where in these two time periods do things kind of align. And you can really see it at the end when he wakes up and he has his plaid shirt on, and it's not that much unlike a plaid shirt from the 50s, right? People wore jeans. What kind of jeans? What are the similarities? What are the differences? So I've just played a lot on that. And at the time, 1985, I mean, if you didn't have a pair of Guess jeans, you weren't anybody. So, so that it was kind of like, what was the most fashionable thing happening? And then what were the things in those bits of fashion that could tie us back to the 50s? So that when he went back to the 50s, Zemeckis was really like, you don't really want to know right away. Like, if you were an audience member, if you were a person in the high school, like you're not just going, oh my God, who is that guy? So subtle differences and some subtle similarities.
Now I was going to ask about some of the other looks in it. I've heard you talk before about Doc in the 50s and his particular look. What was there was a whole thought process behind that.
Well, watching it this time, again on the big screen, like it's such a silly movie. It's so silly, and it gave me such. I remember taking it so seriously at the time. It was one of my first real period films. I've done a lot of theater, so that part didn't scare me, but just bringing it to life and deciding that it's very colorful and kind of really doing the research that it took to get there. And Christopher Lloyd's character kind of grew out of a lot of different avenues of research. You have the obvious Einstein kind of feeling. He's supposed to be very wealthy, because you need to know that about him. If you can't tell, I mean, he lives at the Gamble House in Pasadena.
Which never looked better. I mean, it's just gorgeous.
And his garage was a set, so. So he's wealthy, he's eccentric. It's like putting all these things together. The kind of dressing down for no reason, the crazy monogram shirts, and then just sort of tossing it up in the air and letting it kind of land. And Chris just, he just ran with it. So
he has the greatest crazy eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, the first movie he did, I think, was Tabor in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah,
I mean, he's just great at that look. But by the way, he just turned 86. It was just his birthday.
Yeah.
But, he's brilliant. He said something about the character that Doc is always in panic mode. Like he never lets up. It's just those, constantly jittery. But the way that Michael J. Fox plays off of him is just tremendous. But I was talking about some of the other costumes in it. I was fascinated how there's not a lot of red in it except on Biff. He's sort of, did you know May Ralph costumes there?
Yeah.
May used to say, she goes, red is a very angry color. And I think that sort of was that deliberate, just using the...
Probably. I don't remember, actually. I think probably, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of soft kind of colors in there. It's like, how do you create the palette being colorful without being strident? And red is quite a strident color. There's not a lot of black. There's not a lot of white. It's very kind of in the middle, but still kind of going back to the idea of Technicolor a little bit.
It's generally kind of a pastel palette. You keep it generally kind of
like a pretty saturated pastel palette.
Yeah. There was something else I was going to...
Except for the best. Of course.
No, of course, Crispin Glover is absolutely wonderful in this. And I say this with the TV section, he's one of the Americans and most great eccentrics. What was it like working with him?
He's exactly like that. Yeah. Was he acting? Was it part of his getting into character? Probably. But he's so kind of kooky, which really lends a whole other element to it. Like you're like, oh, the actual nerd's gonna win here, right? He's gonna get the girl. It's so beautiful. It's so kind of opposites, extremes, and it kind of really works for him. But yeah.
And he's fascinating to watch because no one acts like Crispin Glover.
No.
Nobody.
No.
No,
his hair. He drove me crazy too because he would always come out with only half his shirt tucked in. Fine. It was so important to him to have that. That was his signature move.
Well, I love in the 80s, just hitting me this time in the 80s, he has that horrible 80s yuppie hair. But that was great, that yuppie power hair, you know. So you've done a lot of very elaborate period films with a lot of characters, like Hoffa and so forth, and Titanic. And you have a lot of background players in period costumes. That was going back 40 years. How did you go about dressing them? How much was bespoke? How much was from costume houses?
Well, for the background, I mean, you know, watching it again too, and realizing how it was almost all rental, and it was some purchasing, but it was at the time it was so much more accessible to get your hands on 50s clothes. So you could go to every, you know, Goodwill practically and find something that no one had worn, and so we did a lot of collecting like that too. You know, so it was kind of more at your fingertips. So I had a lot to choose from, and that's why I could be very specific about my color palette. And you could still buy dead stock, which would be brand new things that no one had ever worn. And there were collectors all over the country who had their own collections, and you know, you just start reaching out to people. Of course, there wasn't the internet, fax machine, you know, but you know, so it was harder. But it was like the riches were there. So for this, it was pretty darn, I wouldn't say easy, but it took a long time. We really collected a lot of clothes, and then we would just fit every single person. And as we did that, you sort of feeding into. I really enjoy dressing background, and one of the reasons is because it's really another part of the narrative of the film. It's like a lot of costume designers, or people think that costume designers are just like interested in the stars or the leads, or you know. But the truth is that your background is what kind of makes your palette, and it becomes a whole narrative. It's just like the set design or anything else. So you kind of you take enough time to make it get the. Pretty much, I mean, those high schoolers probably look a little old, but, you know, you try to.
They always do. I agree.
You gotta work those, 12 to 14 hour days. So there's that. It's like you try to sculpt it along with, placing your principles in there. And a lot of the clothes for them were made. And I'm like, why did you do that? Why did you make it so hard on yourself? But also found, it's like that crazy shirt that Michael wears. That's all dotty and crazy. It's like that was dead stock, and there were like 6 of them, and I could remake them so that the pattern matched, and come up with about 3. So and it was also this. I was young in my career, so I was always nervous about not having a multiple. So I was like. Pretty sure I needed a multiple of everything, which I totally over that fear now. But it was kind of a thing. But it was really interesting to. It's the same thing when you make a lot of things for a period film, and you're juxtaposing it with actual real garments from the period. You have a pretty high bar, to me. So, which is a big challenge and a lot of fun too.
And one of the great things about this is, like, so often when you're doing period films, you're dealing with real people, with historic figures. There's a certain amount of fidelity that you have to have to this. And of course, this you can just, you can have a lot of fun with it. But I like how you make it realistic. You're not, nudging people in the ribs by trying to make any of the costumes funny. Like there's a real reality to them.
Except for
Christopher Lloyd.
I don't really go for comedy clothes unless it's really for a purpose. Because to me, it just kind of backfires. It's like the joke gets old real quick. You sort of steal the joke from the actor a little.
No. Eugene Levy in the bondage gear and armed and dangerous. That's an exception.
Yeah.
So it had to be.
Oh my God.
But Christopher Lloyd, so there's the overcoat. That was pretty much a lot of that was for dramatic effect at the end, right?
Mm-hmm. And also, it was really cold. You could see their breath a lot of the time. But also there's a lot about his clothes too that I, in retrospect, but probably at the time intuitively, was there a lot of movement. Everything's kind of with him, right? His movement's chaotic. The clothes are moving. They're sort of sliding all over the place. So that was part of it too. That helps build the exterior character, I think.
Now, were you getting much input from the actors on their costumes?
Yes and no. I mean, there's no more funner in a fitting room than Chris Lloyd, I just gotta say. And he just comes in and it's like, what are we gonna do here? You know, we played around a lot and it was really a lot of fun. The other actors, you know, they're really young. A lot of them hadn't been, you know, in very many films. So it was pretty easy to lead them. And I think when you're doing a period thing too, it's like it's part of your job as a costume designer to educate your actor. So you might be showing them a lot of research material, and I do a tremendous amount of research, so I feel like it's, you know, all up here. But it's important to sort of extend yourself in that way so people are comfortable.
Now, how did you, this is of course the pre-internet era and so on and so forth, goes without saying. How did you research this?
A lot of, at the time, I mean, still now, you can get old catalogs, which are just, you know, the best. Watching a lot of old movies from the period and sort of sussing out like what felt authentic. You can documentaries, magazines. I mean, it's pretty much all over. Yeah.
Now,
the library.
What's that? Hey.
Now, what was your working relationship like with Zemeckis and Bob Gale?
We had a really good time together. It was there were a couple of very specific times, which I'm sure many of you have heard the stories where, you know, the writing would come back around to what the costume might be. And one of them was, you know, I'm not sure, the joke had not been developed when Michael took over the movie of the red vest, that line. So we all got together and it's like, okay, what can you do? And how does he stand out? And what's funny about that? You know, so, you know, again, what's funny? I don't know. So I thought about it for a really long time. And one of the things I came up with that at the time, again, thank you, 80s, everybody was wearing North Face. That was like, you had to have a North Face coat or vest or, I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So I brought that to him, and then Bob Gale wrote the line about the life preserver. So you feel like you really contributed. And the other time, which, you know, that ridiculous looking thing that Chris Lloyd wears when he comes back from the future. And I was really, I don't know, you know, what are you going to put him in, Star Trek, you know, who knows, you know? So I was like, really struggling over it, and again, got together, and the question was posed to me, what are people going to wear in the future? Like, in all seriousness. And I'm like, if I knew that, I'd be a wealthy person. But yeah, it was like, oh my God, what are people going to wear in the future? You know, so there was a lot of discussion, and all I could do was come up with sort of some of the elements that tied into his character from the 50s and on. And then the idea, it was just so ridiculous, you know, it's like, when you look back through time, things like, okay, men have worn ties for decades and centuries, and so let's make it a clear plastic tie. I don't know. I mean, but as ridiculous as it is, it's still pretty funny.
It plays really well, and of course it just leaps out at you. It's so different from anything you've seen in the rest of the movies. And he's been dressed fairly bizarrely through the whole thing.
Yeah,
and
yeah, he had a lot of leeway, a lot of way to go.
What are your best memories of making this?
Ooh, wow. Just, you know, it was a tremendous amount of satisfaction that early in my career to sort of dress the whole scene, especially like the dance, you know, be able to kind of stand back and go, that was pretty good, you know? So, and just working, I really, really enjoyed working on the backlot because it had such Hollywood history. So it was like every day when we would be back there, and I'd just be like, oh my God, you know, just start thinking of all the incredible films that were shot there. And also at the time, my daughter was 1 year old, so she turned 1 on the making of the movie. So that's a really good memory.
Was it a fun film to make? It seems like it was kind of fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. It was really hard shooting. We shot a lot of hours. We had to make up all that that time.
The night for night too.
Yeah, night for night. It was cold, but we had a lot of fun. It was pretty. And I'm just gonna, as a little sidebar here, note that there were literally 3 costumers, myself and 2 people in the credits. That's it. It's like, this is how far we have come, costume people. That is ridiculous. On the poster, all these things all this huge, tremendous effort by a tremendous amount of people to make a movie like that, to dress background, to make the clothes, and it's just things have changed for the better. So that's good.
And you can still fill a theater, and people are still madly in love with the movie.
Yeah, I still wonder why. Can anyone want to speak to that?
I just think it's
Just the confluence of all the things. that were
everything.
there.
It was lighting a bottle. There you go. And again, I think a lot of it has to do. The cast is so good, and fortunately, I think almost all of them are still with us, with the exception of Wendy Jo Sperber, who was so good as Marty's sister. She died way too young, and she's so funny in this. I was going to ask you about E.T. I'll digress for just a second. Deborah did the costumes in 3 of the top 10 highest grossing films. Not bad.
Huh? Yeah,
Not bad.
I guess so.
Now, how did you
Good luck charm, perhaps.
Now, how did you come to work on E.T.?
At the time, I had been doing a film called Never Cry Wolf in Alaska with Carol Ballard, a really incredible director who did Black Stallion. If you haven't, I mean,
It's a really extraordinary kind of phenomenological movie, like that in Black Stallion. There's nothing quite like it, and Charlie Martin Smith's amazing.
yeah. And I had gone to school with Charlie, so he was at the shooting, and he's like, I got a call one day. He's like, "Do you want to come to Alaska?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure. When? Tonight or tomorrow?" So there I went, and there it was. But Carol's a really unique director who works. He shoots himself. It was crazy. It was really, really authentic filmmaking. But he was in that kind of Coppola Lucas family, the Northern California, and so they were, of course, good friends with Spielberg. And I briefly, kind of through a bunch of people, knew Kathy Kennedy. And when E.T. came up, Steven was like, "Oh my God, he's done amazing movies by then." So this was going to be his small movie, and and Kathy was producing, I think, for the first time. It was a female writer, Melissa Matheson, who's sadly passed away. But really, who also wrote, she wrote amazing scripts. She's incredible. But I got the chance, just one day, like, "Do you want to come meet Steven?" Yeah. So we just sat down together, and 20 minutes later, he's like, "Okay, you want to do the movie?" And I'm like, "What? Yeah, of course I do." And that was literally, I think, the most sentimental and special of the films that I've done for me.
Why was it that way, do you think?
Well, it was before Back to the Future. It was when, it was partially that. It was a tiny family. It was a very small crew. Beautiful story. The casting, Henry, they're just amazing little actors, and it was intimate filmmaking. Like I'd done that at Never Cry Wolf, and it was really, that's kind of my wheelhouse a little bit. It's what I really like, where I feel most comfortable. I like being on the set. I like being there to watch the tiny things happen. And it was just such a sentimental, beautiful, and who knew it was going to be, again, so popular, right? It's like that film's captured the imagination of the world. And to his credit, Steven never made a sequel or a remake or anything like that. And it's a very, very special film. And I can, every time if it comes on, it's one of those ones I just end up sitting down and watching it.
You and millions of other people.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
You did something really, there was a really inventive thought process behind Drew Barrymore's costumes and because she's growing up among boys. She's a girl among boys. But talk about that.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, she was the younger sister, and when I design, especially when I have the time, I really get into the headspace of the characters that I'm dressing. And in that case, it was really like, well, obviously she's not picking out her own clothes particularly, right? Her mom's shopping for her. She's being influenced by her brothers. And it's the same with the boys, but you can see them as they get older, they get more sort of unto themselves, right? They become more of an outer personality. But that was part of it, that she had this sort of girl-boy mix. And clearly her mother really wanted her to wear pink or, be a girl. So we had a lot of fun with that.
And also, I believe you dressed E.T. when she dresses E.T. up. Is that right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's tell us about that. You were E.T.'s fashion consultant.
It was. E.T. had a couple of changes. He was fairly cooperative. He was small. It was a tough proportion, but things would just kind of come up. I think that in particular when she dresses him up in sort of the hat and the play clothes and was went back to my childhood of like playing dress up. All kids like to do it. Most of the little girls love to do it. So that was part of it. And Steven kind of came up with it one day, and I'm like, yeah. So I just went home and gathered a bunch of stuff up and came to work and we dressed him up. It was really fun. And his little bathrobe was my father's, and it was a really sentimental piece, and I had used it on almost every movie that I had worked on up to that point, and then it got lost.
Oh.
But yeah, so if anyone ever sees that,
At least it's immortalized on film.
That's right.
At the very least.
That's the thing. Costumes are supposed to live there, right? They don't live out here particularly.
Now, one of your biggest productions fairly early on in terms of logistics was Hoffa.
Mm-hmm.
It stars Jack Nicholson as Jimmy Hoffa. It was directed by Danny DeVito, and it was where you met John Lando, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So, and that one has huge crowds of period extras, lots and lots of angry Teamsters, and a lot of it was filmed in Pittsburgh and Detroit.
That's right.
And did that pose a certain amount of problems in terms of dressing that many people away from LA?
Yeah, well, every time you go on the road, especially with a big costume piece like that, it's a lot of logistics. You really have to leave town with what you think might be everything you need. And so, we just rent a lot of clothes. The movie went from the 30s to the 70s, and it had this sort of repetitive theme of those Teamsters, of those Teamster halls, and the way that it would change in terms of how people dressed coming to a meeting like that. So that was a lot of fun. It was really hard. It was winter, and so.
And it looks like it.
Yeah, it was cold.
Those extras don't look happy.
No, it was tough shooting. It really was. But I think it's a great movie, and Jack Nicholson's performance is fantastic. If you haven't seen it, he's really, really good in it.
Yeah, that leads me into my next question. When you're replicating a historic figure like Jimmy Hoffa in this or Bobby Kennedy, I get the basic idea of how you research, but what are details that you zero in on to convey the character through the costumes? What do you look for?
Well, a lot of it is silhouette, and then you really have to, like somebody like that, you have to look over a lot of their lifespan, because you need to know how they grow and how they change and how they stay the same, right? So, and a lot of research, like when you go back in time, it's black and white, which is misleading. And then you have to kind of look, I look a lot at real clothing, because real clothing from the periods, any period, really gives you a real sense of what the color palette could be. But yeah, it's really kind of trying to place them in a particular place and time. And Hoffa himself changed, but very much stayed the same. So you try to find those through lines and also, the slight differences in silhouette.
Now, where did you get the costumes for all the extras and so forth outside of town?
Oh, we rented almost everything in Los Angeles.
Oh, you did.
And trucked it
Yeah.
yeah. And it was not pretty when it was like icy and the trucks weren't good, and we got to Pittsburgh and it's like a lot of clothes were lying on the bottom of the truck frozen. So it was like, it was just, it was hard.
The glamour of the movie.
Yeah, it was so glamorous, but I was fortunate enough to meet John Landa, who at that time was working at Fox. And he's a very dear friend of mine who passed away last year, producer, mentor, friend, just, really important in my career. And he came out to visit us because it was having a lot of financial problems, and it was kind of a troubled production in some ways. Beautifully directed, actually, by Danny. But he had to come up in the studio to be the bad guy. And so, and one morning I was like, oh God, it was like the crack of dawn, freezing, and I'm like, oh, I hadn't gotten any sleep, and get in the van, and here jumps John, and the first thing he said was, tell me what's going on, what can I do to help? Yeah, so, beautiful person. And just such a smart producer, so smart. I mean, why not start that way, right? It's like, tell me what's going on.
Incredible.
Genius.
So you mentioned the silhouette in recreating historical figures. In Heat, I believe you conveyed an awful lot about Pacino's character, the detective, and Niro's character, the thief, through their individual suits. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, that was an interesting one too, because it's really chock full of men in suits, right? So how do you differentiate them a little bit? And Michael Mann, who brilliant director, was very, very honed in on De Niro's character, and you can sort of see him repeat that character in other movies like Tom Cruise and very, very much the same. But he had a lot of insight into criminals who had gotten out of prison, the things they learned in prison, and the precision of that character is so precise. De Niro's character, he lives like a very precise life. He dresses the same way. His shirts are always incredibly pressed. His hair is perfect. He goes through life like that. So it was really a exploration in gray suits for him. And Michael's incredibly demanding for a good reason. He's got a tremendous gift, a really amazing mind for storytelling. And I think we probably only to the stage of gray suits that you could purchase in Los Angeles. And he would just go down the line and like that one, 20 suits later. So we sort of would settle in that way. And then after that, it was pretty easy to juxtapose Pacino's character, because physically they're so different, right? Pacino's, just even in their real lives, you see De Niro, even today, you see him come on stage and he's very, he's got incredible posture, and Al's kind of like, he's like I am, like that guy. So, and at the time, the fashion was kind of dark on dark, and so it was pretty easy to sort of draw the lines of how they could be different.
You worked on Minority Report with Spielberg again, and I wanted to ask you specifically about working in science fiction. One of the really interesting things about that is it's the future, but it's the not too distant future. I mean, it's not far. It's not Christopher Lloyd at the end of Back to the Future. It's just a slight speculation of what things will be like in a few decades. How did you approach developing costumes for that kind of era?
Well, I think there's a lot of science fiction. When you read a science fiction script, literally they always say 50 years in the future. They like to put it kind of not too far, unless it's Star Trek or something like that. And it was an interesting journey on that, because I really don't like science fiction. I really don't like it's really, for me, the hardest thing to design. Because I'm always really nervous, like, oh, it's going to be so stupid in 5 minutes, it's like it's going to be. So I tend to I'm more of a classicist, I think. So when we develop that script, and Steven had very clear ideas about what he did not want. So that was good, right? It's always good to know what someone absolutely doesn't want. Like, I don't want crazy, I don't want unisex, I don't want, but all the rules that the rules that keep you kind of corralled. And he was working with some people who actually forecast the future. Sadly, they didn't really forecast fashion, but more like the technology. So that was kind of fun. But then I started just playing with ideas in my head about it and reading the script and from a novel and, a lot of the writer's kind of concepts of how society works. And society usually works on certain levels. There's usually at least 3 classes, right? So I started there. I started to think like, okay, you got these people that are rich, you got these people that are contemporary, and you got these people who are the sort of forgotten people. So that's kind of how I started, and I hope you can see that in the movie. There's like in the sort of the traditional part of the Washington D.C. part of society, I used a lot of 40s kind of silhouette, double-breasted suits, really proper, and sort of used that as sort of my palette. And then I went to the place where Tom Cruise lives, which is fashion-y, and really, really stayed away from anything that was too contemporary. It has a really kind of classic, I would say more like 60s look to it. Really clean lines, no accessories, which that's one of my if anyone hasn't noticed in my science fiction work, I like to go no accessories. But it's like keeping it super clean and keeping the colors all on a certain level, and then the kind of wacky, crazy underbelly of people that live there. So it was really fun. It was really good. I worked with different illustrators, and who all had very different styles, which helped to sell the whole concept, to Steven, and a fashion illustrator who did the 60s portion, because they're very clean and kind of robotic looking drawings, just perfect. So kind of started there and then just developed it.
And it's held up really well. It doesn't have that look of, say, like a 70s science fiction movie where somebody's in 2055 and they have a butterfly collar and giant sideburns. So you avoided that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
I mean, the hardest part, I think, was the technology, because like Tom Cruise's group of guys with the helmets and flying around, and the helmets had to have lights inside. And at the time, you couldn't, it's like the technology now, you can do everything smaller. Your phone's on your wrist, it's like things have gotten tinier, but it was hard to get all that technology with lighting that really lit up on their faces. So I'm sure if we could remake the movie today, you'd have a sleeker kind of profile, but say la vie at work.
Mm-hmm. It did. Well, of course, we have to talk about Titanic, and I don't have, do you think you've ever done as thorough and meticulous a job researching a movie as that by necessity?
I tried to, but that was pretty extreme. Yeah.
Now, where did you look for inspiration for the costumes? Where didn't you look, I think?
That's more the question. I think just really, again, like pre-internet, darn it, right? That you couldn't just go clickety-clack and, so there's real value into getting out there and digging. And in that case, it was a lot of paintings, a lot of costume history books, a lot of trying to see like contemporary magazines at the time and things like that, and photography, thank God, it was the period of photography, however black and white. So for the color palette, when I started collecting garments, and I collected worldwide, people, once they knew, like Titanic, even before it was a movie and another movie, but the concept of it is just one of those things that people worldwide are so fascinated with, that whole situation. So when a collector would tell another collector, oh, this costume designer is looking for hats from this period.
So the Titanic collectors were a good source.
Yeah. And then fashion collectors and, people sort of chimed in. And then as soon as I started looking at real things, and I went to a lot of museums in Europe, and, you realized how vibrant the colors were of the time. So that led to a whole different thing. But yeah, looking at in the construction of a real piece of like a dress, like when you started taking them apart and looking at the intricacy of things that were made in those times and how opulent and how incredibly, the etiquette of like how many times a day rich people changed clothes. So for every different occasion of morning tea and afternoon lunch and dinner and drinks and on and on. So it was just like, kind of putting yourself back in time and thinking of how could you spend the most money on what you were wearing?
Well, I think also that's something, if you're dealing with a lot of older stuff, one of the most striking things is how much better made most clothes were. It's ridiculous, especially men's clothes.
Oh my God.
It's ridiculous.
Women's clothes too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And does that influence the way that you make the costumes? Because of course, for so many years, even on period movies, they're gonna it's a movie, and they'll kind of half-ass the stitching and everything else. So is that something you're very, very?
Yeah, I'm very particular, and I think there's, people who have worked with me through my career are like, wow, she's picky. But I kind of pride myself in that because I'm very hands-on, and I like that, that I find that costume people, for the most part, all of us bring this love of clothing and how to make things and how to do things with your hands, and really want to do it to the best of all of our abilities. So it's kind of just a great match for people like us.
How many extras did you have to ultimately dress
On Titanic?
Titanic, roughly?
I think we kind of counted it up after a while because we shot for so long too, and then repetitively, I think it was somewhere close to 30,000 people.
Wow. Oh my God.
Like if you had 700 people for 3,000 days, it felt like it adds up. So yeah.
Weren't there also costumes that were shot flipped?
Yeah. Because we only built we only built half that giant ship. So there was just one side. So when we would shoot on the other side, we had to, some things didn't really matter because you can see them on both sides of the ship. But like the Titanic hats were written backwards, so you could, so Jim could have the ocean in them. A lot of the suits I made purposely designed to be double-breasted so they could go this way or that way. Yeah, little tricks like that. I think we did pretty good because you can't really tell.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's there's a pretty symmetrical element to it.
No, of course, with Avatar, you entered into a whole other different world of costume design, and you worked so intimately with the animators ultimately. And I remember there was something Dennis Muren said when he was doing the effects for War of the Worlds, that he kept hammering in to his animators to obey the laws of physics. And I think you were having to do a lot of that with the animators.
Yes.
Could you talk about your whole process with that?
Yeah, Jim Cameron he's a physicist. I mean, he really, he's a scientist at his core, and which makes him a very demanding filmmaker and a very precise one. So as we went through that, I mean, the first Avatar I came in kind of halfway through, and since from then to 2, I mean, the technology just was like wildfire. And I think that John and Jim both really realized that in order for the costumes to look real in the movie, they had to be real. So we make everything, and everything is handmade, and I mean, it's an incredibly creative experience. And then you get into the physics of it. So you get Jim saying like, well, it can't be feathers because feathers would X, Y, Z, and you're like, oh, yes, it can be, and I'm going to show you how. So there's a lot of making and experimenting and putting things underwater in fans, wet to dry. Like we had to go through a whole thing with wigs of doing all different kinds of hairstyles, filming them through the water, getting up, and seeing how long it would take for, say, curly hair to bounce back to curly. How long it takes for water to drip off. It's just even that kind of thing.
And that's critical to CGI because I think, especially for the first 10 years of CG, there was so much ridiculous stuff going on that made it seem sort of silly and cartoonish, and obviously he was fighting tooth and nail to it, no pun intended, to avoid that.
Yeah, and I think it shows in the movie. I mean, and the standard that he held us to also is the standard that he holds the visual effects artists to. So they're constantly coming back. We work with them all the way till we're still working with them. You know, the film 3's coming out in 2 months, and we're still like finishing up.
Fire and Ash, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like they're constantly checking and rechecking, because as you go through, this is what I always say, it's like as hard as it is to make one of those pieces, which takes an incredibly talented group of people that can really work with their hands, people who weave, who sculpt, who carve, who can knot beyond, all day long, painters, I mean, just amazing talents. And, as hard it is to make the garment, it's just as hard to remake it in the virtual world. You have to, it's a whole different, like, okay, let's start all over here, we're gonna start the fitting again, and we're gonna work from the ground up, and we're gonna tell you exactly, here's the real thing, so they can look at it, touch it, put it in front of, we put it in front of the wind, we do whatever we need to do, we discuss how, and even with all that, you have to watch through the whole process, because as soon as they get something on, I was going to say a human body, but actually I meant a 9-foot tall blue person. It's like the weight of something, right? So the weight of something, the way something moves, if it sticks to the body, if it's fit tight, if it's fit loose, what happens to the materials? And a lot of the materials on that are meant to be something else. Like, so we might make it out of fabric, but it's meant to be a leaf. So there's a lot of verbiage that goes with the work.
Because each of the Navi tribes and the thing, they're drawing on whatever materials are closest to hand, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys for inspiration from that, you were drawing on all these indigenous people from all over the world.
All over the world, yeah, all over the world. And again, that's where research comes in, because just like, you find in the 1860s how people were wearing hoop skirts somehow all over the world. It's amazing how things travel and how culture works as a conglomerate almost. And when we were researching a lot of indigenous people from everywhere, and kind of, Jim had sort of settled in this sort of South Pacific kind of Polynesian kind of place, but you can find, people ornament themselves with tattoos here, there, everywhere. So you start to find the commonalities of how people dress themselves. And it's the same thing as like getting into the mind of Drew Barrymore's mother and how she's going to pick out something at Target for her kid. It's the same thing. Get into the mind of these people who have these things to draw from, and how do they put them together, and how do they ornament themselves as a people. And even people all over the world who have very, very minimal clothing love to decorate themselves. So it's a really interesting, it's a great job, because you get to learn so much every time you pick a project.
So this was the science fiction movie you love decoration.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. This was the one.
It was not really science fiction, more, would you say more fantasy?
We haven't been that far out in the universe yet. Who knows?
I know, it's like 50 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Nobody has sideburns or butterfly collars, so you did it again. Do we want to take questions from the audience, or? Yes. Okay.
I want a congratulations. I've never seen the whole movie, so I really enjoyed it. I'm just wondering how you feel when, like, there's people here, cosplay, when you see your costumes out in the real world with people wearing them and sort of.
Yeah, that's a funny one. It's weird at first, but I think it's very flattering, obviously, because somehow it's the collective imagination of a lot of people. Something strikes a chord, and they, people who love to dress in costume, or, the red hoodie from E.T., or, so it's incredibly flattering, and I still am shocked by it each and every time, to be honest. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I have a question. It's kind of a two-part question.
One is I'm really curious about the transition between Eric Stoltz's costume, which was he had that dark coat, he had the white T-shirt with the patent on it, dark jeans, that sort of stuff, to Michael's Marty, and what that thought process was. Did you feel shooting with Eric that it was wrong or something, and you need, or is it just the actor necessarily?
So it's really the actor.
Okay.
It's with the, like we said that at the beginning, the sort of the physicality of an actor, how they're gonna play that part, you know, and you would be a fool as a designer to not honor that and work with that.
And just a quick question for the fans. There's in the community, especially the cosplayers, there's a heated argument about the denim jacket, whether it was off the rack or whether you put it together from other
You mean Marty McFly's?
Marty
You
McFly's
mean that
denim,
guest thing?
the guest
Okay.
jacket, yeah.
It's a combo, it's a hybrid, so for all of you, fun fact.
Set the record straight.
I think it was a tough one because it was kind of a large child size, number one. It wasn't a full-on adult, so it was hard to find. That's why I'm like, why haven't they ever remade that? Maybe that's one of the reasons, but I got it off the rack and then I customized it.
Okay.
So it's a hybrid, so.
When I was researching this, Mika? Oh, yeah.
Oh, go. Finish what you're saying. Yeah, finish what you're saying.
Oh, no, I was just saying, when I was researching this, like, I could not believe how fetishistically broken down some of the costumes from, like, Back to the Future and Titanic were. I thought, oh my God, it was astonishing. Like, it was.
I don't know all that gossip, so.
It was like these recipes, and there were also like how to make Back to the Future costumes with like practically nothing. You know, there was stuff like that.
That's
so,
great.
But here's back there.
Oh, yes. Hi. Hello. 705 member. Hi. I love dressing backgrounds, so I always love looking at things like that. And growing up and watching this movie was just really exciting, and it actually brought me to why I'm here today. But my question specifically is something that's bothered me for years, and I suspect I know the answer, but maybe you might be able to share some clarity. Growing up in Philadelphia, we always went trick-or-treating for E.T., I should say, specifically for E.T. We went trick-or-treating at night. So what confused me was why the kids were trick-or-treating during the day. And you're gonna have to ask Steven Spielberg.
Because they start off during the day, but you have to do that incredible shot of like dusk, right? Where there's just kids. That's the money shot.
Of course.
It looks cool.
Yeah, it just looks great. It's evocative. If you just shot that at night, you would see like 3 people and then a bunch of shadows. Exactly. You get all this, and then you have Deborah Winger coming through in her Bizarro costume, and all the guest actors in there that you don't know about. But I think it's just the effect of the beautiful sun going down.
Awesome, because it just bothered me. Always, I'm like, I'm going out in the day. Thanks.
It's cute.
You're there.
I was gonna say I came a long way for this event. I'm all the way from the Bay Area. Near guys, James Cameron, you guys shot Back to the Future Part 3. But anyways, we're here to talk about Part 1. So my question being is, and for both Michael Fox and Eric Stoltz, when they did the scene in the mall and the Kristen Glover scene in the bedroom with the obviously radiation suit I'm wearing, was it this idea to mind that, was it just like off the top of your guys' head when you were thinking about the costume idea? And was Stoltz considered for this exact same look too, if he were to film that scene before he got kicked off?
Probably because I think it's kind of a generic look that, it's probably, I'm not sure of your question, but like the things that would be available to, again, going into the mindset of the characters, like that they could get, right? That they didn't have to build some ridiculous looking, suit. That there's things out there that you
Just the suit he
find.
wore. He wore in the time machine going
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm surprised you find a yellow one. Did you make it?
Actually, I had a friend of mine make it, and we perfected it. We did all the little rivets like you guys did in the film.
It's Darth Vader from Vulcan. Like,
Yay!
So,
I mean, I thought of it
This
since
is
I was a little boy.
custom
I
piece.
wanted to always be Radiation Marty, and this is the
Okay.
person. But
it.
I'm honored that I get to see this. So thank
But
you.
where's
If
Edward
you
Van
can.
Halen? That's what
Right?
Actually, one of my favorite gags, and it bypassed me the last time I watched it. The dorky teacher that shuts down Marty's band is Huey Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
So,
Right.
how many of you have never seen Back to the Future before tonight? Okay, I thought so. Okay, yeah, it's such a quintessential part of American culture. Right over there.
Yes, hi. So I was wondering, how difficult has your job become with the advent of fast fashion and how it's really destroyed every avenue when it comes to fabric sourcing even?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, sourcing good fabrics for period pieces is so difficult now.
Yeah, it's gotten much harder. I just think that, like I said, you could actually find old fabrics, and some now you still can, but it's much harder. And also, the sad truth is that COVID really destroyed a lot of fabric stores. So just in general, like trying to go out there and find some rickrack, good luck. You got to get it on the internet if you can find it. So it's really it's hard to watch kind of the demise of the toolbox that we've had for so many years, and kind of wondering where that's going to go. And it goes along with another thing that I just kind of wanted to touch on tonight too, was this advent of, what's happening kind of in the film business and how it's changing so much right now with streaming and, Los Angeles, California, everything, the film production being way down, and like the uncertainty of the way that people are going to watch films. And that, I grew up and my design career grew up designing for the big screen. So it's really gratifying to see things that way, and I think we all have to get out there and support that. But at the same time, for designers, we just had this discussion at the Academy about the fact that we as designers and film goers and filmmakers have to stay up with what's happening, right? There's no denying that things have changed, that people stay home, people watch movies on their phones. God forbid they should watch Avatar on their phone, you're gonna miss a whole lot. But they still will, right? And if the plot holds and people like it, that's their business. But that this kind of, it's important for all of us to recognize that things are changing and that the landscape of filmmaking is changing, and that we need to embrace that. And that's why there's things like an Avatar film, the costume design in that is done the same way, and maybe even another harder way than every traditional film I've ever made. So people want to say like, oh, it's just a computer did that. And say, no, that's not how it works, right? So we have to embrace the new. We have to embrace the fact that designers are going to come up designing for streaming, which doesn't make it any less valuable than the big screen or your iPhone. But, so that it's like, let's, as a community of artists, we have to embrace where filmmaking is going, and we don't really know where that is right now.
No, and I think, I remember Phil Tippett talking about going through something very similar. Phil Tippett, the effects director, who of course had worked so long in stop motion and all these other three-dimensional techniques, and when he first saw the computer test for Jurassic Park, he was having a panic attack, and then of course they brought him in because everything that he had learned applied to computerized monsters just like it did for three-dimensional ones. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to what I was saying about the laws of physics. It has to register as real. But I do think, for instance, with costume pictures, for instance, a horde of costumed extras will always, I think, look better than CG extras.
100%.
Absolutely. All you have to do is watch Heaven's Gate.
Mm-hmm.
Watch Heaven's Gate. They spent too much money on it, but you know what? It's all on the screen, and those scenes with all the period extras are mind-boggling.
Yeah, and you can, it's also the advent of all this, digital whatever stuff going on, but you can tell when it's done well and when it's not. When it's not done well, like I'm sorry, I don't want to like diss Marvel, but there's sometimes where those effects are like, you're like, wait, you think that looks good? You know, it's like because they think like, oh, the audience won't care. You know, the audience won't care if X, Y, Z. Well, I don't think that that's the case, and I think any good artist will agree with me.
No, I agree. I had a stop motion animator friend of mine said once, for instance, with stop motion animation, he said, no matter how real CGI looks, you still kind of know it's fake. And no matter how fake stop motion looks, you still know it's real. I mean, three-dimensional and real registers as real. So there's some things you really can't do otherwise.
Yeah, and I also think it's, you know, I don't mean to poo-poo any of that, because I think it's also like, what are all these new avenues that we can explore, that we can embrace, that we can bring to the art of movie making?
Yeah, no, I think it's part of the toolbox.
Yeah.
It's part of the toolbox. More questions?
I got one for Doc Brown's pants when he's on the clock tower, and when it rips it, how did that come into play? So, sorry, for the Doc Brown's pants when he's on the clock tower and the cable, and the cable rips it. How did you?
I think we
play in that?
probably shot it, I mean, I'm pretty sure he had multiples, because that was my multiples days. But I think we probably shot it in a lot of continuity. So if something happened, you just carry that continuity forward. So you weren't planning on it ripping, but you know, with the thing attaching to it, you know, all that, as it creatively unwound, because it may not have been written perfectly like that, then you just sort of, you know, it's your job as any kind of crew member, to, no matter what department you work in, to just sort of follow along and try to keep that continuity. So you see when he jumps down, he's got a little hole in his ball in it.
Well, did you have to
yeah, you know where it goes like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think we have time for one more question. Right there.
DGA director here. Just curious about your collaboration process. What sort of style enables you to do your best work? And just piggybacking on that, is there a type of work that you wish or that you're hopeful to do in the future?
You mean what style working with a director? That's a really good question, because depending on the director, a lot of directors are really, really talented, right? But you just need to meet one that messes with you. You're just like, okay. But you know, that it's supposed to be, and I'm, again, very, very old school. To me, the director's the king, right? That whatever the director wants, the director should be able to have it. So it's not like in television showrunners and people where the director's almost adjunct a little bit, and it's sort of run by committee. And it's getting maybe a little bit more like that. And in the past, when you go back to real studios that weren't Coca-Cola and products and conglomerations, you had a studio head who was also a filmmaker, an artist, and but you know so I grew up just at the tail end of that, where your director, if your director says, and there are a couple times where I've been like, you really want that? It's like, zip it, go get it, right? Make it look as good as you can. And you buy into it, and you do that, that's your job. Your job is to deliver their vision. So it can be it's really, really important. And the most important thing to me, and the way I work, is to gain my director's confidence so that I can take it off their plate. Because a director has 8 billion things to decide all day long, to think about, to, you know, especially if they're acting or writing and directing, which are, you know, writer-directors are the best because they really know their characters. But you know, that's the idea, so that they don't have to worry that you're not going to fulfill their vision, that you have enough conversation up front, because when things get rolling in production, it's, you know, sometimes it's just like, and, you know, I'm doing just tonight finishing a very, very low budget movie here in town with Andy Garcia, who wrote, directed, acting, produced the whole thing. And I've worked with him before, so we have a little bit of a shorthand, but, you know, with our schedule, we shot in 23 days. It was an incredible, it's called Diamond, it's gonna be brilliant, it's a really good script, really dense, a lot of movie making in 23 days, and the biggest gift that he gave me was, he let me do my thing. Because I wouldn't have made it if there had been a lot of like picking or, at a point, as a director, you have to hire the people that you think can do the job and let them do it. And that's in every category.
Well, Deborah, it's been an honor and a privilege having you here.
Thank you for attending, and please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, so you can be notified for our future screenings.